Bob McCown's John Shannon. It's the Bob McCown podcast. Available for your listening enjoyment if you choose on Sirius XM 167 at 6 o'clock Eastern time each weekday.
Including tomorrow. We're on tomorrow, even though it's a holiday.
Oh, I did not know that. How do you know that?
Because they haven't told us otherwise.
Oh.
We have to assume what we're on.
Well, they are assuming we're on. Maybe we should just not go on and see what happens.
People need...
Let's see what happens. Let's see if they lose their minds. What would they do?
Plug
Are they
something else
bright
in.
enough? Are they bright enough over there to figure out what to do?
I don't know. I don't know them over there. Do you?
Do you think Joe Thistle would create a program right out of like thin air? Would they run a replay of some show from 6 months ago? What would they do? I want to find out.
Inquiring minds.
Want to know. Speaking of inquiring minds, I don't know if he has one.
Oh, of course he does.
Mike Zeisberger of NHL.com will join us. Hockey talk, I assume, when we come back after these messages. We were supposed to have two guests today, but we only have one.
Don't give out the secret. Don't give out the secrets. You don't.
Not a big deal. Mike Zeisberger is with us, but Mike Harrington, who was supposed to be with us, has been carrying you for a long time, and so he has a bad back. Had to go to the hospital.
Carrying me or carrying you?
I'm carrying you.
Me?
Yeah.
No way.
Hello, Zeisberger. How are you?
Good.
What are the plates in the back there? Are those places you've eaten?
No, Bob, you can't get these at a drive-through. They were gifts from family members from Europe. You're going to ask me what they represent.
No, I'm not.
And apart from the fact that they were gifts, I have no bleeping idea.
But you hung them on the wall.
Yeah. Just in case they come visit.
Yeah.
As opposed to digging all the stuff out of the closet relatives give you that it's like, this stuff is crap until they show up.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's very kind of you, but not necessary. These are people who probably won't come visit you. And if they do, all you got to do is remember where you put them. Either that, like how many times have people come in your house and say, where's the blank I gave you? They don't do that. And you know what you should say is, well, it's a cheap piece of shit. And I didn't hang it on the wall. You know,
normally they say, where the hell is the money you owe me?
There's that too. Shannon, what the hell are we here to talk to Zeisberger about?
Well,
we're like 2 weeks away from the end of the regular season.
Yeah, it's too early to do a playoff preview, but
how about Vladdy?
No kidding, huh?
Wow. Are we doing?
I just want to say, as a former somebody that worked for a tabloid for a lot of years, I loved looking at the back pages of the New York papers today. I'm still have a connection to that, even though the majority of the world doesn't. But there were some good ones like Vlad the Impaler. But my favorite, who's your Vladdy? And the fact that he did it, guys, and you know, I've been I grew up a Red Sox fan before there were Blue Jays. Because, you know, to be honest, when I was a little kid and knew, not too much about baseball, I put on the Saturday game of the week.
We all did.
Just as I turned people have to understand back then, you did have to physically turn the channel. It came on the baseball game and this little white ball went into this big net over this big green wall. And I thought, man, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And when you're a kid, you think that it's like that in every stadium, and it wasn't. So I became a Red Sox fan and have been up till 2000, early 2000s, where lived the torturous existence that we did. Except when I covered baseball, I was you don't have a rooting factor. I even interviewed Bill Buckner when he was with the Jays, and if you can be unbiased doing that as a Red Sox fan, you're pretty damn professional, and I will say so myself. But even as a Sox fan, Yankee Stadium is the grandest stage you can be on. I remember the first time I went there, I went, right out to the outfield to see Babe Ruth's monument and all that cool stuff. For Vladdy to do that on that stage last night, I just thought it was wonderful theater, just wonderful.
You would have been at Old Yankee Stadium too, Mike?
Yeah. That's where I first went and saw. One of the other coolest things, John, is that when they were, so I guess they go from plaques to monuments. So
right.
if you're a great player, you get a plaque. If you're a legendary player, you get a monument. So the Jays were there early in my career when it was Joe DiMaggio days. So they were going to make his plaque. He was going to now get a monument. So Paul Simon, it was a Sunday afternoon, Jays, Yankees, old stadium, sunshine. Paul Simon trots out into center field, puts down a stool with an electric guitar and plays Mrs. Robinson. Where have you been, Joe DiMaggio? And that still to this day is one of the coolest moments.
Was that when the monuments were part of the playing field?
No, not quite.
Because there was a time when the monuments were actually on the warning track.
And no, John, I wasn't there to see Joe DiMaggio get that either. Okay. But that's what I mean about what a wonderful stage it is. And for Vladdy to do what he did, it's been a long time since the average sports fan in New York has talked about a Blue Jay player. They were the sport.
Like ever.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the Red Sox. I assume you've been to Fenway probably more than a few times. It's interesting. In 1976, the year before the Blue Jays, I got hired by Labatt, who were then part owners, to go and do some interviews to promote the upcoming 1977 season. So in September of 76, I got to go to 2 ballparks and watch games there. And the 2 parks were Fenway and Yankee Stadium.
Oh,
and you can't be in 2 better ballparks, more representative of baseball in the history of the game. And I can't remember the circumstance. I think it was supposed to be a twilight doubleheader, like a 4:00 start at Yankee Stadium. And either I got the dates wrong or the schedule had been changed. In any event, I showed up at around 2:30, 3:00 in the afternoon at Yankee Stadium, and there was nobody there. And they let me in. And I got to walk around on the field at Yankee Stadium. The game didn't start till 7. And I was there at like 2:30. I had hours and hours. I went everywhere there was to go. And then went up to Boston. Right? Yeah, it was like unbelievably cool. My first time in Yankee Stadium. And I get to, all by myself, walk around. There wasn't even a grounds crew guy there yet. And then the next day I went to Fenway in Boston, obviously, and it was a night game. And I deliberately went at around 1:00 in the afternoon and experienced the exact same thing. Everything except the only thing I didn't get to do was go inside the scoreboard, the manual scoreboard, and on the Green Monster in left field. It was actually locked. I couldn't get in. I tried.
Well, the rodents that live in there didn't want you in there, so
I guess not. In any event, so we have that in common. I guess we're not here to talk about baseball.
Why not? We can talk about anything we want.
Well, you still have time to follow baseball, Z?
Yeah, not like I used to, and I find it harder. One of the things when I did cover the sport, that when you cover, I was fortunate enough the first year that I covered it was 93, so they won the World Series, and it was wonderful. And I've always been a baseball fan, but I got to tell you guys, I have a lot of admiration and sympathy for beat writers that have to cover crappy baseball teams, because you know what? The interest level falls off when it's the end of May and you're covering a team that's 30 games out. And I remember one of my pet peeves, and it's where I can't, where I thought to myself, as much as I love the game, I can't do this for another 20 years, is I remember we were at a day-night doubleheader in Milwaukee on a Wednesday afternoon. The Jays were like 30, 35 games out. This is mid 90s, after the strike.
Right.
And Juan Guzman's on the hill. There's 500 people in the stands. And Juan was a great guy to deal with, but he took like 3 minutes between pitches. And we had come up with ideas like, let's wire up the mound with an electrical charge and just press the bleeping button when this guy doesn't throw the ball for a team that's 30 games under 500, like you're killing me over here. And so, yeah, I do continue to follow baseball. But I've kind of, I was old school in terms of the rules. I'm still not big on the ghost runner whole thing about that, but I'm glad they're speeding up the game, Bob, because as much as I love the game, I find that, now that I'm not covering it, now that I don't have a vested interest in it, my God, some of those games drag on. And there's no reason.
I'm curious, as a guy who would be around a club every day at the batting cage, was it easier to create relationships in a baseball environment than it was, say, a hockey environment?
It was then, John, because they would open up the clubhouses for a 7:00 game at 3:30.
Yep.
And you could just hang out. There was nobody like booting us out of the clubhouse or saying, here's the window of, and guys would just trot in at their leisure and you could shoot, you shoot the fat with them. You go out during BP, you could sit with them in the dugout, and it's like all the sports now. And even prior to COVID, I covered a couple of games, which I hadn't done in like 10 years. And everything is more regimented now, although, the media is now allowed in the clubhouses again. But even beforehand, there's more regulations now than there were then. But yes, I've told people, like, of all the sports that I covered at that time, and we're talking about early to mid 90s, there was no better access than there was for Major League Baseball. And I don't know how you found it, Bob, but that's
exactly the same. Exactly the way you did. I mean, you really got it. You had the opportunity, if you wanted to really get to know these guys. Mm-hmm. And, some days you'd go days and days and, hi, how are you? And, where'd you go last night? What'd you do? Whatever the conversation was, had nothing to do with baseball. And then 5 days later, you go, hey, same guy, that you just said hi to. You'd say, you got a minute? We can talk about something. And almost invariably they would. So you got to establish this personal relationship that is really difficult to do in any other sport. You just don't have 2 or 3 hours where you're walking among them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, the manager generally is behind the batting cage. He's accessible. The hitting coach is there. Pitching coach sometimes is there or down in the bullpen. If you want to get to somebody, you can. It doesn't mean that they're going to want to talk. But if you want them, you got time. If the guy says, give me 20 minutes, you got 20 minutes. You're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
The only place you're going to go is upstairs for what used to be free food that you now pay for.
I always got the sense that there was much more ability to create a bond with a baseball player than it was
there is
the other 3 sports.
Well, not to mention you have spring training. I don't know, Z, did you do spring training too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like I was there for all of spring training for the first 2, 3, 4 years, like all 7 weeks. And in that environment, especially in the early days, like 77, the first year, everybody stayed at the Ramada Countryside Motel. Yeah. And, nowadays the players all are off site. They all have their own places. The coaches pretty much have their own places. There's almost nobody in a hotel except minor league guys or a motel. Yep. But in that first year, the media, the executives, the players, the coaches, the manager, all in the same hotel. And it was a tiny little place. It had one bar restaurant. So literally, there was no obstacle 24 hours a day between you and talking to anybody that you wanted to. Mm-hmm. And it created friendships that, quite frankly, last till today.
And what there also wasn't, Bob, at that time, were camera phones and stuff that people could put on
Exactly.
social media
Right.
that could take a shot of you talking to a player, like drinking a beer or whatever. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but in today's social media, people can take that and frame it in a commentary that might not be realistic, but they can put it into the framework or narrative that they want. And I think that's one of the hardest things about trying to develop relationships with players too. I have as John knows, one of my better friends, Kyle Shore, his son Devin plays for the Edmonton Oilers. And, I've known this kid. I've watched him play in a backyard rink since he could barely put on a set of skates. Always told him, I'm your friend first, and I do my job second. So, separation of church and state. He never thought he was going to be good enough to play in the NHL because he was a late bloomer in terms of growth, but he loved to play the game. So when things worked out and he was coming into the NHL, the first thing I told him is, buddy, you've got to be so careful with social media now because you never know where the camera phone's going to be.
Yeah, well,
I see that brings me to a point. You have done an amazing job over a period of time, particularly since you joined NHL.com, of creating relationships with families. Tuesday night comes to mind when you were around the Power family. Oh, what was that like? You
mean all 100 plus of them?
Yeah, I know. It was it was the family reunion with Mike Zeisberger in it.
The unwanted uncle. It was amazing. I mean, they're from Mississauga, and actually Owen Power's mother used to be one of the managers at, what is it called, the Ford Performance Center? I don't know, MasterCard Center, whatever they call it now. Yeah. But the Leafs practice rink, she used to be a manager there. So, you could hear even coming out of the coach's press conference, you could hear out in the Arena Bowl people chanting MVP in that, and it was the entourage for Owen Power. But the coolest thing, it was wonderful. The first game, they win 5-2, yada yada yada. But the coolest thing was his 92-year-old grandmother Yvonne had never been to an NHL game. I don't think she's ever been to an NHL game, period. She gets to go to her first game at 92. MLSE gives her a certificate for this being her first NHL game at Scotiabank Arena. And she gets to see her son or her grandson win his first NHL game. So she called it a dream come true. And I know a lot of times in sports, that's a cliche, but that was a really cool moment. And the smile on her face, even at 92, that was really, really cool. And in fact, John, I tweeted out a photo of her, and it ranks among the top things I've ever tweeted out in terms of likes. It had over 5,000 likes. So you can tell that it kind of tugged on a lot of people's heartstrings.
How, well, both of you, give us your evaluation of this young man. Is he a really good player? Is he got a chance to be, one of the all-time greats? I mean, where is he in terms of skill and talent right now?
Well, I mean, when you talk about all-time greats, I mean, it's kind of, especially on defense, does he have the tools? Yes. But let's not forget, Bob, I mean, we rave about Cale Makar and how young he is. I think there were, John, 3 players selected before Cale Makar?
Yeah.
So it's always difficult to evaluate. What I see is this: he's got the physical tools, but between the ears, he is a very mature young man. And what I saw the other night is that the moment wasn't too big for him. But let's not forget, this kid's played at the World Championships against men. Mm-hmm. So he understands, it's not overwhelming. He's not buying into the hype. Whether that translates into, an all-star career, we will see. I think the biggest thing and I wrote about this the other day, one of the big things he has going for him is that he has Rasmus Dahlin on the team, who just turned 22, who was the first overall pick a few years ago, just like Power is. So Power doesn't have to be the face of the franchise, kind of like Dahlin was. There's somebody else that's been through it. There's somebody else that he can go to that understands the publicity growing pains that he's going to have by being in that spotlight. And Dahlin even said, he can come and lean on me anytime and I will help him. So what it says, Bob, I mean, I'm not predicting that he's going to be an all-star or anything, but I'll tell you what, the fact that the Buffalo Sabres have two potential all-star young all-stars in waiting defensemen on their blue line, that's a hell of a lot good way to start a foundation. I will say that.
The one thing you look at Owen Power is his ability to move the puck, his ability to skate. You forget he's 6'6".
Yeah.
I mean, he has the skills of someone, you always assume that if you can stick handle in tight, if you can skate on your edge as well, you're not 6'6". And so that you combine his size with his hockey talent, and then some of that innate stuff that Mike, that you were talking about, there is a chance for this guy. Remember, at the World Championships, he wasn't supposed to play more than 2 or 3 minutes a game. He was supposed to be a spectator, maybe dress some nights, and learn how to play at this level. That's what Hockey Canada does with young players. They nurture them along. And in the gold medal game, the one that Canada won, he was at 24 minutes and had played a lot of hockey in that tournament a year ago. Is he the real deal? Sure, he's the real deal. But as we learned yesterday, Bob, in talking to Chris Pronger, there's lots of obstacles along the way before you can get to become a true pro, and you're going to have to learn that. And that's something that Power has been exposed to in this 1 year of his hockey career, and will be exposed to more of it over the next few in Buffalo.
Imagine this. It's your first NHL game. You're on, I think it was your third NHL shift. And all of a sudden, you're the lone guy back on a 2-on-1 with Mark Giordano, a former Norris Trophy winner, and Austin Matthews, who won the Maurice Richard Trophy last year. And Matthews is also a guy that Power said he looks up to very, very much. And yet this kid showed the poise, what every coach tells you to do on a 2-on-1. Take the passer, let the goalie have the shooter, which he did. He breaks up the 2-on-1. And I loved his answer, like as Bob would call them, the puckheads always want to make things more difficult or more complicated than they should be. So somebody asked him after the game, so on that 2-on-1 so early in your career, what are you thinking? And he goes, don't let Matthews get the puck. Well, I mean, that seems obvious to the rest of us, but we've seen enough defensemen in the league that have been around 10, 15 years that don't get it.
Yeah.
This kid got it on his third shift of his career. So that told me something.
I got another question for both of you too. Obviously, if you're a Buffalo Sabres fan, you've got to be scratching your head and wondering, well, what would this team look like? How much more optimistic would I be about next year if Eichel was still here? Well, he's not, and he's not coming back. But if you had to draft one guy right now and it was either Eichel or Power, who would it be?
Well, I mean, Power has played one game in the NHL, Bob.
I get it, but by the same token,
but
Eichel's been hurt a lot, and I'm going to say I don't think he's quite lived up to the advanced billing. I don't know whether you guys agree with that, but I think there's still lots of room for him to do that, but he hasn't so far.
Here's the deal about the position that Power plays. If you can get a puck-moving defenseman that has the competent skills and size that Power has, you probably take the defenseman first.
I don't disagree.
Wouldn't you, Mike?
Yeah, and I was thinking about this the other day when I was at the game watching this, that a guy, and it's a little bit overshadowed by the way what Matthews is doing right now, but Morgan Riley is having a hell of a year. And, we've discussed the positives and negatives of the Kyle Dubas era. I still think there are those guys are on the hot seat if they don't, the front office, if they don't finally win a series. But for them to get Morgan Riley signed to the extension that they did, and it is nobody can tell me different. It's a hometown discount compared to what some of the other defensemen got on the open market. But you know what, guys? I looked at Morgan Riley and started thinking, could he possibly be the best Maple Leafs defenseman since Borje Salming? And I mean, you guys can chip in on this, but other than McCabe and Caberlet, and I thought they were really good. I do think that Morgan Riley is just a touch above them. But if he is, like in my opinion, the best defenseman they've had since Borje Salming, what does that say about a team like the Buffalo Sabres that possibly can have two blue chip guys on their team at the same time? And I think that puts it into perspective. Not saying that they're going to be a Morgan Riley, not saying they're going to be a Borje Salming, but the potential is there. And I think the fact that the Leafs have gone so long without really having those blue chip defensemen just shows you how hard it is to find them.
Yeah. Well, yes, there's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a goaltender, it doesn't matter how many great forwards you've got. The Toronto Maple Leafs are evidence of that. The Edmonton Oilers are evidence of that. And perhaps the Buffalo Sabres will be evidence of that. Yeah. You better have that goaltender.
Hey, what was your sense of the Sabres as a team, Mike?
Well, I've seen them now, John, I think 4 times in the last 4 weeks. I've seen them. They beat the Leafs in Toronto. They beat them at the Heritage Classic the other night, beat them again. And then I was there for Eichel Palooza when Jack Eichel came back to Buffalo. And they beat them there. What I like, I don't think that Donnie Granato, their coach, gets enough credit. Because when you're a team like the Sabres, okay, they've for so long, okay, they haven't been in the playoffs in over a decade now. It's a decade or even 11 years, I think. But they go through a rebuild, then they try to do the quick fix. They overpay guys, and it just you're treading water. And I like where they are right now, because I think if you're going to have young guys, you need a coach that can teach them. And too often, teams talk about their prospects. Well, prospects mean diddly squat if you don't develop them the proper way. You look at what's going on in Buffalo under Don Granato. I mean, Darling's had his growing pains the last few years. What we're seeing this year is one hell of a composed, skilled defenseman who looks like he's getting it. And he's only 22 years old. I mean, he's got more wear in his tires than the average 22-year-old, just because he was the face of the franchise, not by his choosing when they picked him. You look at a guy like Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson had 18 career goals before this season. He's got 33 this year. Yeah. That shows me that a coach is not only giving a good message, but the players are listening to him. And I think for Buffalo, that just keeps hitting, wash, rinse, repeat the whole time. I finally think they're getting it. Stay the course. That's hard to tell a fan base that hasn't seen playoff hockey in 10 or 11 years, but there is a lot to like about this team. And, Bob, you talked about Jack Eichel too. I mean, look at the guys that they got for him, and we're not even talking about the draft pick. I mean, I'm still of the opinion that whoever gets the best player in a trade wins the trade. But I'll tell you, Alex Tuch has been outstanding for the Sabres. Moreover, he grew up a Sabres fan, and he wants to be a Sabre, and I think that rubs off. And I think there's a different culture in Buffalo now where guys are just saying, like, you know what? You don't want to be here, so don't be here. We don't want you. And I think that's very important.
We got to take the break. We got to take the break, John. But Tuch was a guy that emerged in Vegas and became, he was a guy I'm quite sure the Golden Knights did not want to give up. They had to in order to make the Eichel deal. We got to take a break because we're way late. Mike Zeisberger of NHL.com is with us back after these messages. We're back. McCown, Shannon, and Zeisberger in conversation. I interrupted John before we had to take the break. So
just that, the third part of that trade was Peyton Krebs, who's got huge upside for Buffalo as well. And in many ways, people said, well, did Kevin Adams get enough for Jack Eichel? And in the end, the answer is, even before the draft pick has come to fruition.
Yeah.
I think your point about Tuck wanting to be a Sabre is so important. I think that's key for every small market franchise, to find people that want to play in those organizations. That to me is vital to the success of the franchise, both on and off the ice. And so to see a guy like Tuck want to be part of it, Peyton Krebs contribute. I mean, at first blush, the Sabres won the trade. And now you wonder if, the Sabres were never going to make the playoffs, and it looks like the Golden Knights might not make the playoffs. And then the measure is, well, the Sabres definitely won the trade.
I want to talk about the playoff race in the West. And we mentioned Vegas and Vancouver in the last 60 seconds. These are two teams that are battling for a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Might not get it. But they're interesting in this way. Vegas at the beginning of the year would have been considered a marginal Stanley Cup favorite, at least capable of doing that. Injuries have waylaid them. They put on a run recently, but it may still fall short. And then there's Vancouver, who got off to such a horrendous start. It looked like they might be the last place team in the entire NHL when all was said and done. And then Boudreau comes in, Rutherford comes in, things get stabilized, the team starts playing well, and here they are battling for a playoff spot. One was expected to be good, the other one was hoped to be good. What's the reaction like at the end of this in Vegas and in Vancouver if that team, their team, does not make the playoffs?
Well, I mean, in Vancouver, I think Jimmy Rutherford, when he took over, was realistic in what he had in front of him. He wanted to see which players stood up, moving forward, and they have cap issues, which players they had to kind of cut bait with. So I think for Vancouver, there wasn't really a strong expectation because they've been chasing it for so long about making the playoffs. They did have a good run. But I think this is more big picture for them. If they don't make the playoffs, the hope was there and they're going to be disappointed. But I just think the offseason is going to be another step. It's going to be Jimmy's first full off season with the Canucks. It'll be Gabby Boudreau's first off season with them. And so I think it's more of a step for them. Vegas is a different story. And I've heard it kicked about that, maybe they'll make some coaching changes. I think that would be a mistake. I think that Pete DeBoer and Steve Spott are one of the best 1-2 coaching combinations in the league. But my God, if you look at their injury list, and not only their injury list, Bob, they are so, and that goes above them. That goes to management. But they've signed some of these high-priced guys. Like they take, they gave Peter Angelo that big contract. They traded for Eichel in his contract. I remember last year they had so many cap issues that there were times where they didn't even dress the full allotment of players on a given night because they couldn't under the cap. So, I just think it's a question of getting healthy. Because, I mean, look at it this way. I mean, on paper, you could have a power play in Vegas of Pacioretty, Eichel, Stone, Theodore, and Peter Angelo. I would put that power play up against anybody in the league
100%.
on paper. But I don't think they've ever played together. They've never been healthy together yet.
Well, to that point, the first game that group of 5 played together all season long was Tuesday night in Vancouver.
Okay. I wasn't sure if
Tuesday.
Stone had played yet.
Stone played. Mark did play Tuesday night because it was the first time that that Peter could have put Eichel, Stone, and Pacioretty on the ice on a single line. First time all season long. So from that perspective, I think that if you're worried about change there, the only way that change occurs in Vegas, in my opinion, is if Bill Foley, has a conniption and says, I'm really pissed off that we missed the playoffs and I'm making changes. If he's rational and looks at the situation and realizes all those man games lost, then you're going to say, hey, listen, we're in better shape. One of the unsung heroes of that Vegas team that is just back from injury and was out for 4 months with Alec Martinez, who was a big part of their blue line, was from the moment he joined them in the expansion draft. And he had the skate blade cut on his face, remember? So he's finally back and contributing as well. So I was one of those guys that the knee-jerk reaction was, well, if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to make some housekeeping moves and make some changes in the front office. I don't believe that anymore.
No, I think it would be silly.
I think it would make no sense. The building blocks they have created there with Eichel, Pacioretty, Stone, Pietrangelo. Shea Theodore's had a great second half of the season. Those are as good as building blocks for any team in the NHL. The bigger question for me is, they are one injury away from having a major catastrophic fall, and that's because of Robin Lehner. If Robin Lehner is not healthy, then this team's in big trouble. And that goes back to, and I'm not putting words in Bob's mouth, but it goes back to one of Bob's favorite topics is, did they make a mistake not being able to manage, Lehner and Fleury better?
Yes, they did. Or did they choose the wrong guy?
Yeah. I agree with Bob 100%, and that's hard for me to say, as you guys know. But
it happens a lot. It happens a lot more than you want to acknowledge.
Or find a way, or find a way to have both of them there. Find a way to have both of them.
Well, here's what I don't understand. So you put all your eggs in the Robin Lehner basket, okay? Well, he's been Humpty Dumpty, okay?
Oh, yeah.
He keeps falling down, and they all the king's horses and men a lot of times can't put Robin Lehner back together again. And you had to know that. I mean, it's not that, him being hurt all the time isn't a one-off. We saw it on the island. We saw it in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. We saw it in Ottawa. So, not only are you departing with Fleury, and I know he's, you're kind of looking at the age factor. But if you're building a team to win now, why are you going with the China doll?
Well, I mean, the allegation is, and there's no reason for me to disbelieve it, is that the decision was made by the coach and the general manager, or one convinced the other, that size mattered in goal.
Absolutely. That was exactly what they decided. They wanted a big man to play the position.
Yep. They wanted a big guy, and they didn't want the little acrobat. And it wasn't so much they didn't want Fleury, but they were just convinced that this big guy in Robin Lehner was a better choice. And because they had perceived weaknesses and cap issues, they didn't feel like they could pay both of them. And, as John says, I think it was John said, they're one injury away from a disaster.
Oh, yeah, they are. And John, that could be, and that could be any game. That could be any game. Now, the other night in Vancouver, he made 2 saves in the third period.
Yep.
That allowed them to stay in the game, get back in the game, and steal a point out of the Canucks. But I'll tell you what, every time he's on the ice, he scares me.
Well, the other thing too is, maybe you guys can speak to this. I've never met him. I don't know him. Do you think he's liked in the room?
Yeah, I do.
More, as much as Fleury?
I don't think there's many players in the entire league that are liked as much as Fleury.
I think the opposition likes Fleury more than anybody, as well. I mean, he's just a likable guy. But I don't think there's any animosity or any vitriol against Robin Lehner in the Vegas room at all. Bob.
Hey, John, to your point, and to poke some holes in the Vegas decision again, how tall are Koskinen and Mike Smith?
Well, Koskinen 6'7" and Mike Smith 6'4".
How's that working? Are they going to get any Vezina votes this year?
I don't think they're getting any Vezina votes, but they're going to make the playoffs.
So much for putting big man in goalie pads theory, isn't it?
Well, and I mean, also you got to remember that Fleury was the face of that franchise 4 years ago.
Yep.
And that just doesn't mean just something to the fan base out there. It means something to the other players.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, you don't give the goaltender the C, but you could have given Fleury the C in Vegas.
Yeah.
It could have happened. And you essentially got rid of him. You chose somebody else over him. And I don't know whether there's a lot of Fleury fans in Vegas that are still go back to that whining and complaining every day they lose. But
no, I don't think, because I think the fan base, and I say this with tremendous respect to them, I think that they like their team more than they like any individual.
Well, they may very well, but
and I think the event of going to a Golden Knights game is still more important than watching one individual player. I think they'll always have a soft spot for Marc-Andre.
Yeah. Well, but at the end of this season, when they miss the playoffs for the first time, and I mean, they may not, but it looks more and more like it's going to be a tough road. Will that fan base recognize the injuries and just asterisk it and forgive everybody? Or are they going to start wondering, well, so this is what it should have been like the last 4 years, but it hasn't been. And we've been spoiled. And now we have a better team on paper than any of the previous 4 years. And we're not in the playoffs. And maybe we're not in the playoffs because, at least in part, Fleury is not there.
Yeah. Do you remember when that first year, and the Golden Knights took the hockey world by storm.
Mm-hmm.
One of their, other than Fleury, their magic phrase was that they were this bunch of rejects and nobody made too much money.
Yep.
Nobody I think made more than $4.5 million. And so they were all in this together, and it really was something magical for the whole season. But then the off season came, and some of the guys had to get signed to new deals, and some of the contracts and some of the guys they had to get rid of. And it really speaks to how fleeting success can be in professional sports.
But they made the playoffs every year in their existence.
And
they've gotten better.
But have they? I mean, listen, they made the Stanley Cup final in their first year and have worked their way down.
Well, there were all kinds of factors in that first year, and a lot of it was magic. But
magic, it was tremendous. It was it should have been on the Strip, some sort of magic show like that.
Well, what it was.
The Stanley Cup final would have been in Winnipeg if Fleury hadn't been making soccer goalie diving saves in that Western Conference final, if you guys remember. I mean, He was just incredible. And I had covered the Winnipeg-Nashville series, the series before. This was still when Winnipeg had Buffalo. And I really thought that the Jets were going to come out of the West the way that they played. They had a lot of depth on that team. And I would say that if you picked one reason that they didn't, or that make the final, or that the Knights did, was because of Fleury. Because even talking to Mark Scheifele to this day, and I believe he's the guy that Fleury made the save off of, he said that kind of brought in that frustration where the Jets were really confident going in against those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, our guys were practically putting their hands up that we scored, and he makes a save like that. You guys both know it's like a certain pitchers. They get into the minds of a hitter's head. Well, certain goalies get into the minds of shooters' heads, no matter how confident they might be. And that was the effect that Fleury had. So, but I think, Bob, that the Vegas fans are educated enough now to know that they can look at a roster and go, man, we're going to have a really good team next year when these guys are healthy. So I don't think they're ready to pull the plug or get too angry quite yet if they miss the playoffs. But if it becomes, I wouldn't want to go 2 years in a row missing the playoffs because I think at some point excuses go down the toilet.
Well, you can't get a snake bit again as Vegas was this year.
Yeah.
I don't think. You're going to have some injuries, but I mean, anybody who doesn't know, it was ridiculous.
Yep.
How many injuries, and I don't mean bumps and bruises. I mean out for a period of time they had with key players. Virtually everybody on the roster.
Their three best offensive players, Bob.
Yeah.
Stone, Pacioretty, and Eichel. It's like saying, okay, you know what? For 20, 30 games of the season, you have no first line.
Right.
Exactly.
No Matthews, no Marner.
Yep.
No Tavares.
Yep.
No. And go ahead and try and make the playoffs.
Yeah.
We better get out of here. Well, that was an interesting conversation.
We never even got to the topic I wanted to talk about.
Well, you didn't say there was a topic.
No, we were going to talk about all the influx of all these kids from Michigan and from the University of Denver. We're going to talk about all these colleges.
We are not going to discuss anything from Michigan on this program.
Why would Bob want to talk about Ohio State's biggest rival? Why?
It was a subtle way. It was a subtle way of me to get all, with all these kids, Kent Johnson and, Blankenberg and all these guys from the Wolverines that have now signed multi-year contracts to play in the National Hockey League.
Well, if you want
Bob, all had Bob to do was suck it up because he hadn't heard of any other name.
Listen, if you wanted Bob to tell you to shut up, okay, you just bring up Michigan.
By the way, I don't need to be on this podcast for Bob to tell me to shut up.
Well, when
Matty Beniers,
you want to talk about that M team's hockey players. When Morosi shows up, you can talk to him. I'll take the day off, and I won't listen to the show either.
You mean you won't be one of our million downloads?
I'm not one of them now. So,
by the way, I just want to say hello to all of our loyal listeners in Singapore and the United Arab Emirates.
Thank you.
Hey,
Okay.
and I'd like a quick shout out too before we leave. I learned this morning that our good friend Darren Millard had a bike accident in Vegas and was in hospital. He's now recovering. So that was brought to my attention by a couple of my NHL.
Bicycle or motorcycle?
I believe bicycle.
Oh.
But I just learned of it before this show really quickly from some of my NHL.com colleagues. I don't know the specifics of it, but I do want to wish Mallard all the best in his.
Well, he was texting me last night, so he must be getting healthy.
Okay.
All right. Well, I did not know either, so we wish him well. As we do with you, Z. Behave yourself.
All the best, boys. We'll talk before the playoffs.
You betcha. There's Mike Zeisberger of NHL.com. We'll come back and wrap it after these messages. We're back. Thanks to Zeisberger for being with us. We could not go the rest of this show without addressing the performance last night by Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Yeah. But not only that, but against Garrett Cole, too. I mean, supposed to be one of the aces in the Yankee pitching rotation.
He is the ace, not one of the. He is the ace and one of the best pitchers in baseball.
Supposed to be.
So Vladdy gets a home run to center field. Barely made it, but it made it.
Yeah.
Then he's playing first base and reaches for a low throw, puts his right hand on the ground, and the runner, I can't remember who it was, stepped on his hand.
Right.
And there's blood spewing everywhere.
It's almost like he's a hockey player.
Almost. And so they march him into the dugout. You figure, okay, that's it for him tonight. Well, they patched him up, put a Band-Aid on it and a boop on his boo-boo, and he went back out and played like there was nothing wrong.
I was amazed that they let that happen. Weren't you? just from a point of view of how long are we going to wait for him?
It's baseball. There's no clock.
Well,
That would have been the greatest irony of all time if they had said, hurry up.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he comes back out, hits another home run.
Yeah.
Then comes up for a third time against Cole. He's got 2 strikes on him. Cole throws a 98-mile-an-hour fastball on the outside corner of the plate. Vladdy reaches out and pokes it into right field for a double. And as he's going by Cole down the first baseline, did you see what Cole did?
He gave him the nod, didn't he?
Tipped his hat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have never seen that happen in the middle of a play. And it was one of those, all right, I got nothing better than that. Right. You hit 2 home runs off me, and then you hit this monster slash line drive down the line,
right,
on the best pitch I got. Tip of the hat to you.
But then he hits
and
another
then comes
home
back
run.
And hits another home run.
And after that, makes a really good play at first base on defensively.
Yeah.
With that line drive was going to right field if he didn't get it.
Yeah, and the game would have probably been different.
Yeah.
But the Blue Jays win 6-4, tied for first place with the Tampas. They play the Yankees again tonight, and enjoy it. And the Maple Leafs play tonight, do they not?
Washington Capitals.
Yeah.
And the Raptors are on their way to Philly for Saturday.
The Washington Capitals, who will make the playoffs, but no one will think anything about them during this.
Well, and here's the thing.
They will be the afterthought.
Except they might catch Pittsburgh and be third in the division. The question mark for Washington has been goaltending. It's been a question mark all season, but they're starting to get really good goaltending, and they've won 5 games in a row. Do not sell short on the Caps.
That's really where I was going with it.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of these playoffs, no one's going to be talking about them, just as they haven't been.
No, that's right. Well, I'm not sure I'd want to play them. I'm not sure I want to play them, Bob.
Yeah. Well, who do you want to play?
I'd like to play the Red Wings.
Well, they aren't going to make
or Arizona or Montreal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, be careful what you wish for, but you have no chance of any of those things happening. Okay. We got to go. Tomorrow is Good Friday, but we will be working away, and
yes,
we'll do a basketball show for you. Get you ready for the Raptors in the playoffs this weekend.
Yes, sir.
Until then, see ya.